Okay, so we are back again with part two of childhood trauma and relationships. I thought that I had a meeting at that time when we got off, but it was actually an hour later, and it's just a grammatical error, and it's no problem.
Well, we got a message
I
from
can do it for
someone,
you.
and it made it look like it was right there.
Yeah, we got a message, and so therefore it seemed as if we needed to be on with them right away. So if you're just now coming on and you don't know what we're talking about, it's because this is part two. You would have to go back to my Facebook page after this one is done and look up the first one.
Well, we can pick up from this part.
Yeah,
you were sharing
sure.
some things about your childhood trauma that you went through with your parents. And I said, be careful because you don't want to damage the relationship we have with them in this present moment. But then you said, which was valid, hey, we got to tell on it. And I do understand that. We've had some people in our family molested by cousins or distant relatives, and everybody's being quiet, and the child who experienced it wants it to be spoken about, but nobody wants to speak about it. Like, it's okay, they were just children. Okay, but we do need it. We forgive the child for doing something bad when they were a preteen or a teenager, but we do need to be able to say, hey, you did this thing, it hurt your cousin's feelings, and now they feel uncomfortable around you. Correct. So, but the adults, all the adults want to just be quiet and hush hush. The adults
want to be quiet, and I think that spirit passes down from generation to generation. So you have a child who grows up, he or she has been damaged by their parent. They learn to keep it on the hush. They don't talk about it out of fear that the parent would find out and that they would be disciplined, perhaps harshly, or that they would
shunned,
be punished or shunned, right?
Like you as a 40-year-old, if you keep rehearsing the bad thing, now the parents want to make a bridge and let it be over, and they don't want everybody to know the shame of what mistakes they made 20 years ago.
Right. So they encourage the child to be quiet about what he or she has experienced, and so then they perpetuate that same situation to their kids. So now you have a new generation of children who grew up now like the past parents who grew up keeping things swept under the rug. Nobody's talking about what they experienced as children, because for some, they think, well, boy, you just emotional, or girl, you just got a problem. Ain't nothing wrong with you. Everybody goes through things. And that's how some parents discredit the trauma of the child. And so how does that relate to a marriage situation? Well, my wife and I went on a walk today, and we discussed some of the, what happened?
I want to see this.
My wife and I discussed some of the things that we experienced. I wasn't having no problem holding that.
Baby.
And so you need a better look for yourself. Okay, no problem. Go ahead. So my wife and I discussed while we went for a walk today how childhood trauma affected us. And that's not working here.
Okay, it's not working. Here you go, honey.
We talked about how childhood trauma affected her and I both as human beings, in how it also affects our relationship with one another. We are two real human beings. Look, my name ain't Joel Osteen. My name is not Ellen G. White. I'm a real human being.
Hello, Mahogany.
And I go through real issues. And some folk think that it's not comely to go through it in real time in front of people. I don't have nothing to hide. In fact, because we have gotten so used in our culture to hiding what we are, how we feel, that everybody's trying their best in church to pretend around other folk like everything's okay.
Well,
and nobody gets the healing that they need.
Well, like the Real Housewives of Atlanta, Love and Hip Hop, LA, Atlanta.
Okay,
people in the church don't want it to be perceived as that either. Like, y'all just rowdy all the time. Y'all just, bombastic all the time.
Bombastic?
Rowdy, rough.
What did Jesus say?
Brolic. Y'all just brolic all the time.
Let me ask a question then, based on the fact that you just mentioned what you mentioned. What did Jesus tell the scribes and the Pharisees when the scribes and the Pharisees said, You're eating with sinners and publicans and tax collectors? Are you out your mind, Jesus? And what did Jesus say to the scribes and Pharisees? For anybody who wants to debunk real or
Not
think that,
real, but don't want to be that far.
Listen. For anybody
that's the wrong spirit.
who, no, I'm trying to explain
but
something.
the way you did it right there.
I will digress. I need you to please hear what I'm saying.
Yes, dear.
Before you give your thoughts on it, because I do know that your thoughts are valid. Let me say what I'm going to say, because you interrupt my train of thought and it's hard to remember what I'm going to say. So here's what I was going to say. Thank you, God, for bringing it back to me. And then I will be quiet so that you can share. When Jesus said in the Bible that he came not to save the righteous, but to bring sinners to repentance, he said it in response to holy men who felt like you're actually eating with thieves and low-level people and tax collectors. You're eating with them, Jesus. You're hanging with these people. Why am I saying it? Why am I even referring to that scripture? In our religious experience today, and I've noticed this, many of us as Christians are doing our best enactment, or rather our best portrayal of perfection. Church is not a place where we come to pretend like we got it all together. Because if indeed that is what we're doing in church, then we are missing the point. And this is why many of us who have experienced childhood trauma are trying our best to pretend in front in front of other people, because we're afraid, or have we been taught that dealing with our problems is not the right way. So we pretend that everything's okay, even when and another thing Jesus said, he said the church is a place for sin-sick people. He said the church is a place where people who have issues go to have their issues dealt with. So again, the question is, why do we pretend so often that there is no problem? And I'm going to answer the question. I think that the reason why we pretend that there is no problem, because as children, we were taught that we do not discuss what problems and issues we have. We put on our best face, we smile, we wash our face, we put on our best dress, and we go and pretend in front of people, whether it's at school, whether it's at church, that everything's okay. Whether it's at the elementary schoolyard, that everything is okay.
Well, she said that's why she didn't go to church, but we can't.
Wow.
We can't not go to church.
Right, go ahead, sister.
We cannot fail to, don't forsake the fellowship of the brethren. We
No.
still go. We some good people at church and some challenged people at church, but we don't go for just the people. We go
because we're sick. Yeah. We go because we need healing. And see, here's the next thing. When we see people spewing out in church, or if we've noticed that people are mistreating us, and it happens, it's the truth, it's just reality.
Or people because you have
people in their own head, you've got people who are hurt and are hurting. And so when they come to church, they express that hurt on others. They spill out, they throw up, if you will, on others. And sometimes for some of us, we can't handle that. Woo. We've got to remember that the church is a hospital. It's a place where sick people go to get healing.
About the part about the parents too, about telling everything that your parents, every mistake that your parents made when they were in their 20s against you as you were a little child. But you know, they want to feel like their sins are in the sea of forgiveness too, and that they're healed too. And so they don't want all of that drudged up, and they feel some type of way about everybody knowing all of the dirt from their past too. So it's a fine balance between sharing your pain and not just throwing your family under the bus.
I was making a reference in what you're saying to, there's a book, my wife's a teacher. She has showed a book to me, shared one with me and my two daughters, called A Child Named It.
Child Called It.
Or Child Called It. And she told me that these books are
part of teacher training while you're in the university, while you're working on your undergrad degree. Social workers and teachers who have to go through this. It's like a book study to help you know the real life story of how it was like a family with 5 boys in it, 4 boys, 4 brothers growing up, and all the brothers were treated well, taken for Happy Meals, clean clothes, good school supplies. But one child was like the whipping boy. He never got new clothes. He never got the Happy Meal. He never got anything great. I'm a victim. You're a survivor. Yeah. But he was always mistreated. He was singled out, and the teachers didn't understand how the other children in his family were well taken care of, but he was the one singled out, so they thought it was just him. But it was actually the mother who was taking out her anger on him because that one boy reminded her most of the father who she was having conflict with.
Right, the father who left her.
Well, he was there. He was there with him.
Was he drunk or something like that?
He was a drinker, and she was a drinker too, but she just couldn't control him. But she could control that little boy that reminded him most of that dad.
Of the dad. So the point of me adding that story to the mix is that for the sake of millions of children today who have been blessed and inspired and encouraged through the story of the boy who wrote the book concerning his life.
And the teachers who trained those abused children.
And the teachers who trained them. Millions of kids have now, as a result, been set free from childhood abuse, trauma, etc.
And the teachers learn how to recognize it too. That's what the main goal of the book is, teaching teachers how to recognize abused children. So the children, or the teachers, you're saying, have the ability now to learn and see the signs that there's abuse in the home. So my point is that because of that one sacrifice that the young boy made to let people into his life and see the trauma that he experienced as a child, millions have been helped and have been saved. That's true.
So we relate that to then right now. How do we relate that to your childhood trauma? Because that's what this conversation is about, or mine. There is this opinion widely expressed that when we go through things in this house, when whatever things happen in this house, it stays in this house. And so the child then grows up with that same mentality that when they get older, even though they've experienced trauma that has set them in a particular direction, that they are not supposed to talk about it because mommy and daddy said whatever happened in this house stays in this house. And then when you get older, you portray or you facilitate or you reinforce them same ideas, and nobody gets healing because we want to protect what happened in our homes. Listen to what I'm saying. The child in the book, A Child Called It, wrote a book, and it took a lot of guts and faith.
Courage.
I'm quite sure, courage, for him to write that book and talk about the pain that he experienced at the hand of his mother. And I don't know, was he and his mother's relationship patched up, or did it never get better?
He was taken out of the home.
Oh, he was taken out.
He grew up in a foster care system. The other brothers that were well taken care of got to stay with the mother.
Okay.
But as he grew up and got his degree, he began to write his life story. And he wrote A Child Called It, and then A Boy Called It, and A Man Who Survived. I think that's the last book.
He wrote three or four books.
Yes.
And as a result, millions have been helped. But let's just imagine, had this boy kept it on the hush like his parents wanted him to, like many of our parents tell us to.
He kept it on the hush for a long time, but then it was a good teacher who recognized it.
He brought it out.
And then
he brought it out.
Your arm is broken again?
Right. I went to school as a child, beat up. Social workers would call and they would find out and investigate what would happen or happened in the school, in the home. And I didn't go, matter of fact, just to show you
would never tell.
That I never told. That spirit was embedded in me of keeping it quiet. That was embedded in my mind as a child.
But it was one time
I went to school and teachers would pull me out of the classroom. It's not like I'd go to class and raise my hand and beg to tattletale on what was happening in my home. I was not that child. Parents or teachers would come and pull me out of class. I'll never forget it.
Because they read the book. They
read the book. That's exactly right. They
What's wrong with this boy?
How to look for signs of trauma.
Abuse, yeah.
And so they would ask me, they'd pull me out of the classroom, Andre, what's wrong with you? Why are you XYZ? Right? And I would look at the teacher and I would lie.
Hold on just a second.
Okay, give us just a second.
Hey, we were at base 7. We had the slushy, the Heath, and the mozzarella.
Toast 1283.
There you go. So listen. The teachers would pull me out and they would say, "Hey, Andre, what happened to you? Why is your eye dark? Why are you limping? Why are you scratched up?" And I would tell the teacher that, well, I had an accident at the playground yesterday after school. Or I would come up with some other story because I knew that if I spoke the truth, parents would be in trouble. And I loved both my parents, irregardless of the fact that I was being mistreated by one of them. And so I would lie. But teachers weren't dumb.
They could figure it out.
They knew how to figure out what was really happening. And
well,
so
it was the severity and the frequency.
The severity and the frequency of me coming to school, damaged, injured, etc. So again, teachers were trained to identify where there was trauma and to deal with it. What you have now is that you have children who grew up now and are parents, who are husbands or wives, and there are issues in their marriage. And one aspect of the issues in the marriage points back to the childhood trauma that you experienced, that you learned to suppress and sweep under a rug. You never dealt with. And so now in your marriage, you learn to suppress the issues under the rug. You don't deal with them until someone goes postal, until someone blows up, until cuss words are unleashed, until cheating is experienced. And that's the plan of the devil. Everything has an effect. It's a domino effect. Thank you. Everything has an effect, brothers and sisters. Is that it? Oh.
Oh, you got a slushy coming.
Okay. We're ordering some drinks here at Sonic, non-alcoholic. Let's make that
They
clear.
don't serve alcohol at
But
Sonic.
hey, these folks don't know. They might not know.
There's ranch and marinara in the bag.
Thank you so much. Have a good night. Okay, so.
Thank you for the food, boy.
Yes, Jordan. We're just really grateful. I'm going to park back over there where there's some light. You ain't got to hold that flashlight. And so we noticed and we understood from our experience. Today we went walking, my wife and I. We said this in the first video. This is part 2. We said this in the first video that we went walking today. And when we went walking, we thank you, dear. We noticed
we had a light bulb.
That we had a light bulb experience where we just started talking and sharing with one another about why we felt the way we felt, why we've acted the way we've acted, because everything stems from something. It's called kinetic energy. If I push a rock down a hill, it's going to develop energy, and by the time it hits that vehicle or hits that house, it's hitting with the force of the energy that's built up in that rock while it was tumbling down the hill. And that's what we're experiencing in our marriages. We're dealing with one another from a systemic issue that happened up here on the hill before the rock was even pushed down the hill. And by the time that rock hits the wife or the husband, it's blown up into something much grander than what it had to be had we just dealt with our issues and talked about it. But because, again, as children, we were taught not to talk about what we experienced. If we talked about it, we were called a tattletale. If we talked about it, we were told we were soft. If we talked about it, we would get a whooping. So we learned.
For talking about.
Yeah.
But sometimes you talk about extra stuff, but things you overheard. But hey.
I did, and I talked a lot as a child. And so that only made it more of a reason why my parents felt like they needed to hush me.
Hush up,
because I was embarrassing them, if you will, or the things that I would say after the things I had experienced or saw would be something to damn them, if you will.
Or repeating grown folk information that you heard other grown folk talking.
Right. And so many parents, or rather children, grow up that way. And when they get married, they are suppressing pain and anger. So let's be specific about what we talked about. When my wife and I went on our walk,
Well, you want to wait
we talked about no, I'm okay. We talked about the triggers that have us feeling the way we feel and why these triggers are there. Okay? For example, when we had our explosion on Facebook Live yesterday.
I didn't explode. You had the explosion. I was just experiencing shrapnel.
Oh.
The bomb went off, and I just got the secondary shrapnel pieces exploded on me.
So
I was shocked.
Let me correct that. Yesterday, then, when I exploded and my wife got hit with the shrapnel.
Right.
Boy, interesting way of terminology.
You said exploded. We hit the bomb. No, you set the bomb off, and I got the shrapnel.
Okay, I'll take that. When I blew up, like the World Trade Center, and when I did something crazy, she got the aftermath of it. And we decided today to talk, and we went on a little walked a couple miles, and just decided to say what we felt and why we felt the way we felt. That is healthy for any relationship. Let me say that. See, you have been taught to suppress.
Mm-hmm.
You've been taught by your parents, by their parents before them, and it's been systematically passed down
just be
that
quiet.
Whenever you go through things, just shut up. Don't talk about it. It ain't nobody's business. Nobody care anyway.
Yeah, ripple
And
effects,
so,
Mahogany. That's right.
Yes. And so we don't learn or haven't learned to talk. When we went walking today, I said to my wife that, there's a certain thing that you do to me that when you do it,
it reminds you.
It reminds me of my father. And although my father and I are now at a better place in our relationship, the truth of the matter is that there's a lot of damage and trauma that has not been dealt with.
Healed in you.
It is not healed. And look, I've done my best because I'm not the offender in this position. And what I'm saying is I didn't beat up my dad.
Okay.
My dad beat me up. I didn't cuss my dad. My dad cussed me.
Okay, so let me.
However,
I got
go ahead, please.
As he was explaining this part to me, he was doing it in a very aggressive way, like how my daddy would talk to me as he was explaining his pain. Mm-hmm. He was doing exactly the same kind of thing that I experienced when my dad would handle me the wrong way, just aggressive nature, big tall man over a little bitty girl. But now, even though I'm a woman and I know I'm not big and as strong as my husband, I don't have to just take it like I did as a child. So I said, wait a minute, this is a cycle here. As you're explaining to me my talking to you that reminds you of how your mama would just say, hush up and be quiet and let's get moving or whatever. You're doing the same thing. So it's a cycle. The enemy is using what we experienced as a child to make us get in a hailstorm of trouble with each other now in the present.
Right.
And I didn't know I was doing that to him. I didn't know as I talked to him and said, well, let's get about the business. Be quiet. Let's get ready for church. Let's do this. Blah, 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 blah. Stop getting caught up in the melee. I didn't know that was hurting his feeling and making him feel like that. And he didn't know when he starts talking with his hands and being brolic and stuff that it's making me feel like, oh, I need to get on alert because I'm about to swing on this Negro in a minute.
So he
didn't know.
So do you hear what she's saying, my wife? Her childhood trauma has put up walls of defense against me, and my childhood trauma has put up walls of defense against her.
When we act them out unknowingly. So
neither one of us are getting our point across in the marriage or in the relationship.
Mahogany's right. You both unknowingly triggering each other in direct results.
There you go.
That's right.
And because before today's conversation, we hadn't really identified it. And this is another reason why. Hear me, hear me, hear me, hear me.
Okay.
I need you to listen.
Too much.
Because many of us, well, that's just my style.
No,
Many
it's
of us
not.
feel like I'm going to have sex before I get married because I like sex. I enjoy sex. It's fulfilling me. I didn't get the love and the intimacy from my parents, so I can get it on my own whenever I'm ready by letting someone sleep with me or me sleeping with someone else. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, God tells us in his word that we are to wait and get to know that person, marry them, then sex comes.
Well, you make it sound
Right?
like we had sex before we got married, and we did
didn't.
not.
We did not. We
Even
did
though
not.
we waited, even though you may wait, you still may have some issues that you don't really know about, that you won't know about until you've been living with each other for 6 months or a year. You just won't know
There's some
it.
things that you won't know, but here's the idea again.
But it's much better to wait and not have
It's-
other thing on top of you.
You're waiting
Please God.
to please God, and while you're getting to know God and pleasing God, you are getting to know your spouse. Sex muddies the waters, brothers and sisters. Sex muddies the water. No, my wife and I didn't have sex. In fact, I've been married twice, and both women that I've been married to, I did not have sex with neither one of them before I married them. Now, that don't mean I was a virgin when I got married. I had a lot of sex. But by the time I started to want to do right, too much sex. But by the time I started to do right or desire to, both times before I married my first wife or my second wife, I had started asking God for his guidance. And I learned that, you know what? Sex muddies the water. Your emotions get caught up in somebody, and then you start to excuse their bad behavior.
You can't see the real person because you're caught up in the physicality of the enjoyment of connecting to them, their penis and their vagina.
And that's why I referenced the fact that I had a lot of sex before I met my wife. Although I didn't have sex with her, here's the reason why I'm saying and I'm bringing it up. Because when you are used to sex, even as you're trying to reprogram the mind, a lot of those firings are still guided and directed in that direction of I want sex, I want intimacy, I want to kiss, touch, and feel, and all those kind of things. And you've got to now fight those thoughts alongside with the thoughts of the spirit trying to tell you to be patient. See, when your flesh is used to something that you shouldn't be used to, now you have a war that's waged against that thing that you shouldn't be used to, and God's voice talking to you, telling you what to do. And again, when we jump into stuff because we're used to something and we're looking for that thing, you forget to really look at who that person really is. You forget to really stop and understand whether or not you are compatible with that person. Sex muddies the water. No, we didn't have sex before we got married. But again, sex muddies the water. This is why God tells you, chill out, curb your enthusiasm, wait, get to know that person. Because the minute you start having sex, they could put a gun to your head sometimes. And I'm just saying that hypothetically, I'm not saying it's true. But let's just say they could put a gun to your head and you would be so caught up in love that you may not be awake enough or alert enough to realize that you're really in danger. And that happens if you watch CIA shows like Discovery ID, if you watch shows like Unsolved Mysteries, if you watch shows like Forensic Files, where you meet these stories of murder and all this kind of stuff, every time they interview one of the persons, how did they end up getting close to the murder victim? Love, sex. They were able to snake their way into the thoughts of the person, so where they weren't looking or thinking or being aware or attentive, because they started having sex or there was some type of intimacy formed between them and the person. And that's when the murder took place. That's when these kind of things happen.
But as it relates to us, you were fasting and praying and you stopped talking to me completely so you can hear the voice of the Lord.
Uh-huh.
But, however, even though you did that, I still said, let's wait.
Right.
And you said the Lord said it's okay.
I did. And I believe still that God wanted us to marry and that we should have been together and that we are meant to be together. However, I still believe that I should have waited a little longer. Straight up. I had just gotten out of one marriage now, although
I tried to get him to wait.
She did. She tried. My genital areas were talking for me. Let's just be real. My genital areas were helping. She wasn't giving me sex. We already made that clear. Listen, men normally more so than women. I'm being real. Men more so than women activate or are stimulated by their desire for sex. Women.
So you were celibate.
I was celibate with you. I wasn't having sex with you. But I was ready to rush into marriage because as a God-fearing man, I wasn't going to just jump in the sheets with you. And then I also knew that we weren't going to get frisky until I married you. So sometimes you rush because you don't want to wait and take your time. I'm willing to be honest about that. I'm willing to throw myself under the bus about that. I love sex. And because I was not willing to wait as long as I felt I needed to wait, I didn't get to know me as best as I needed to.
You're right,
and I didn't
Mahogany.
get to know you the way I needed to. What did Mahogany say?
Mahogany says Satan's go-to is sexual immorality. He easily uses it to distract and deceive. That's right.
It's the truth. Mm-hmm. And so you caught up with the bells and whistles because, man, I know I feel about her this strong and we ain't even had sex yet. Just imagine the fireworks and oh my goodness, and the butterflies that are going to be floating around once we do have sex. So for you who's a God-fearing man or woman, you say, well, we're going to have to go to the courthouse. We're going to have to get married first because I love the Lord. And you do, but you rush into it. And then you just get married and then you start.
Not little Lolo. Little Lolo was waiting 3 years.
He was waiting. Well, praise the Lord. And
little Robert waiting 3 years.
And that's why we need to have proper education because, again, you come into these relationships as broken men and women, people who have been hurt. And so you're looking for something to replace the love that you missed. Okay, you're looking for someone. We will. We're looking for someone to soothe the storm, if you will, because we didn't have the love and the affection perhaps that we should have had. Yeah, the storm. There's a storm in our hearts and our minds.
Oh, you've been together with your best friend for 25 years.
Wow, praise the Lord, Mahogany. And I praise the Lord that we can talk about this now. Look, many of us, let's just be real, we're flawed. And as flawed men and women, we're having to learn after the fact. Only Jesus is perfect. All
That's right.
Well, true. But listen, what I'm saying, dear, is that many of us who are real with ourselves and who aren't pretending that we are correctly righteous in ourselves, if we have any righteousness, we know that it's the righteousness of Christ, not us. And for those who are able to admit that, you notice that you are finding it out that you have to make adjustments after the fact that you really should have made beforehand, but you're making them after the fact because you might have rushed. You're making them after the fact because you perhaps just didn't stop and think enough. You weren't patient. You jumped into that situation, and that's just the reality for many of us and where many of us are at. So what I'm saying is we are learning on the fly. We are reassessing. We are re-evaluating. We're revisiting
the airplane while it's in flight.
And that's just the reality because either you give up on the marriage and you say screw that person, and they say screw you, and you give up because you just didn't work, or you humble yourself and you try and fix it while you go.
Yeah, let's laugh. Somebody put a laugh on that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So
Bing bong.
I want to say as we close, what's the solution? 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 3 through 5. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 3 through 6. Google that real quick. 2 Corinthians, I want to read that. I want to read that and break that down real quick with the next couple of minutes we got, because I do got to go in like 5 minutes. So I want you to Google that. That's 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 3 through 6, KJV, because my Bible's not with me.
Corinthians.
Real quick, guys, please don't go. This is the most important part of this. Please don't go right now. Hit the share button.
2 Corinthians what?
2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 3 through 6, KJV.
Well,
we're going to share this real quick, break it down, and then we got to go. This is
3 through 3.
2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 3 through 6. Yes.
Well, I'm going to read my part first, then he's going to read his part. We do live in the world, but we do not fight in the same way as the world fights. We fight with weapons that are different from those the world uses. Our weapons have power from God. These weapons can destroy the enemy's strong places. We destroy men's arguments, and we destroy every proud thing that raises itself up against the knowledge of God. We capture every thought, take it captive, and give it up and obey Christ. We are ready to punish anyone who does not obey. But first, we want to obey fully. Now, that was the International Children's Bible. But my husband wants the King James Version. You don't want the Amplified?
Amplified is fine as well.
Okay. Amplified.
I've got just a few more minutes. Please, guys, I need your attention for this. The Bible says in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 3 through 6, though we walk in the flesh, what is the flesh? Your emotions, your feelings, your weaknesses. Although we walk in the flesh, we do not carry on in our flesh. Is this the King James Version? No, it is
Amplified.
Not. Okay, let me go to the King James Version. That's all right. That's okay. You did, and I guess I just not heard you. King James Version. Okay.
Yeah, you said Amplified is fine. That's
all right, no problem. Well, I prefer the King James.
Okay.
So though we walk in the flesh, verses 3 of 2 Corinthians 10. You see how we fight? Or not fight?
I didn't fight.
We just, we didn't have that communication.
I said amplified. Right. You said yes.
Amplified. All right. I really got to go. So baby. Come on, let's go through this. Although we walk in the flesh, what's the flesh? It is your emotions. It is your feelings. It is your weaknesses. Your proclivity towards some things.
It's
drinking, smoking.
Your
selfish will. That's what the flesh is. Although we walk in that, we do not war after it, meaning that we aren't supposed to be caught up with it. Yes, you're in it. Yes, you must see it and know it because you can't avoid it, but you're not to be fought and be caught up with it. Why? Verse 4, because the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. What does it mean, carnal? Although you fight in this flesh, or rather the better word for saying is although you see a war in your flesh, the way in which you fight it is not in your flesh. Just because you see the fight going on in your emotions, your feelings, in your weaknesses, it is not, the answer is not in that. Verse 4 says that the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. There are strongholds in our lives. Our mom and our daddy told us to act like we didn't go through nothing, to sweep it under the rug. And so there are strongholds that are hidden in your life right now that you aren't aware of simply because you suppress them. And the Bible is telling you, verse 4, that those weapons that you're supposed to be using to tear down these strongholds, although they be found in your weaknesses, are not within your weakness or the answer for them. So go to verse 5. Here's the answer. And this is what I want you to hear from me. Casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalted itself against the knowledge of God. Hold up. First of all, if a child is trying to get to something on the 10th shelf on the bookshelf and they can't reach it, you may see the child climb up that shelf and then grab what it is that they want and jump back down. What I'm saying is if you can't reach it, how are you going to cast it down? If you've hidden that thought in your mind, if you've suppressed the feeling of what you've gone through so long, how are you going to cast it down? What we do instead, see, the devil's got a counterfeit for everything. Instead of casting down the negative feelings and expressions that we've gone through, we bury it. And we think that that's casting it out. And the Bible and the devil's saying they are foolish because what you suppress, he manipulates and comes act with you in another way.
Stirs it up.
He stirs it up in another way. you've got to cast it down. And in order to cast it down, you got to touch it. In order to cast it down, you got to shine light on it. In order to cast it down, you got to talk about it. In order to cast it down, you got to go and grab it, not suppress it. Your mom and your daddy taught you to suppress your pain. Your mom and your daddy taught you not to talk about what you went through. Your guardians or whoever it was that raised you told you that nobody needs to know this. And so you had to learn to cast it down by grabbing it and going forward with it. So the Bible is telling you that you must cast it down. And we'll talk more about this next week. We love you guys. We'll see you later.